So we are here with Mary Alice Hostetter. How are you, Mary Alice?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
So I saw on Instagram that you were trying to embrace okra and you had asked for suggestions, and I want to know how you ended up making it.
Interesting you should ask. I didn't have many takers. I did have a few, but I ended up doing a very simple olive oil in the oven recipe, which turned out to be almost palatable. So
I was interested in that because I'm not a big okra fan either. And my son actually makes really good okra. My son's a chef. Um,
ah,
but aside from his, I find it to be not as desirable as other vegetables for me.
no, it's the slime factor
Yeah.
is so close, you know.
Yes, I
So
agree. I agree. So thank you for that. Olive oil in the oven. We'll remember that.
Wait, I have a question about
Y- Yeah.
okra. Why are you trying to embrace okra?
Ah,
Well, interesting you should ask. We belong to a CSA where each week you're assigned, the
The pick of
vegetables
the
in
week. Hmm.
season. Yes.
what's a
And
CSA?
uh,
It's like a
community,
community
yeah,
agricultural.
garden.
Yeah.
If you don't have
Oh,
space for your own garden
I see.
or the
I see.
groundhogs eat everything,
Yeah,
they bring it to a place and you pick it up each week. So it's whatever's growing in their garden. And
got it.
so yeah. So it was okra week.
And it will
I
be
love it.
again one day.
It will indeed.
You should have them include a recipe for it.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins. This is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, honey. Um, so I said I call you Hun, and then I called you Honey. I always do that.
I know you always do that, but nobody's ever called us out on it except for me.
No.
Uh-huh.
So like I said at the top of the show, we're talking to Mary Alice Hostetter. She grew up the 10th of 12 children. I had to check that because I was like, it must be 12 people. But no, it's 12 children in a Mennonite farm family in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So I wanted to welcome you to the show again. And I also wanted to shout out Lisa Ellison, who I didn't realize was someone we had in common. But were you in a writers group with Lisa?
I was indeed. She was in my memoir group,
Okay.
and has been very, very helpful on this journey. So I'm happy you know Lisa. She's a wonderful person.
Well, Lisa and I were in kind of a writers coalition together for a while. I've actually never met her in person, but I love her. I
Yeah.
really
Oh,
do. I just love her.
she
And she's so
she is
supportive.
lovely and lovable. So
Yes.
I understand totally.
Yeah. Thank goodness for social media because I got to watch her journey going gray and just how beautiful she is and like support all of her efforts. So shout out to Lisa.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
will certainly let her
oh
know.
yes, yes, because you're both in Charlottesville. That's
Absolutely,
right.
yes.
That's right. Yes, please do. Um, so I just wanted to say that everything that I know or knew about Mennonites before I read your book, Plain, which I'll hold up here. You guys see it? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Before I read your book and before you and I had our conversation, I knew from the one line in the movie Witness with Harrison Ford, Danny Glover, and Kelly McGillis. And for those of you who don't know Witness, because I think it was an 80s movie, it's about how a dirty cop murders a man in a train station bathroom, and unbeknownst to him, a young Amish boy witnesses the whole thing. Harrison Ford, who plays a good cop, takes the boy and his mother back to their farm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania to protect them. At some point, he asks to use a phone. Kelly McGillis says another family across the field has one, explaining that they're Mennonites. And I was like, oh, okay, so Mennonites are different than Amish people, but they must be kind of the same. So this is what I know. I know that Mennonites are not prohibited from using motorized vehicles. They're also allowed to use electricity and telephones in their home. But I know that there's a lot of similarities with the faith and the belief. So if you could just kind of tell us from your experience and what you know about the difference between the Amish people and Mennonites.
Yes, it is. You have the basis of it. It's just a matter of degrees. They were originally part of the same group historically and divided, I think, in the early 17th century, probably. And it was over issues of progress that the Mennonites were too progressive. So the Amish wanted to uh, preserve some customs like shunning if someone left the group so that they could ban them from being a part of the community any longer. The Mennonites didn't agree with that. And the Mennonites, as progress happened, thought they could have electricity and cars and telephones and so forth. So in basic beliefs, they're very similar, but one progressed and one didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a Mennonite farm might look like a farm in like rural Idaho, for instance, where there's maybe a phone and working vehicles and a television. Is that something that's allowed?
Now it is. When I grew up, we had no television.
No television. And as far as you know, now is technology like smartphones, that kind of thing, the internet
For Amish or for Mennonites?
for Mennonites.
Oh, for Mennonites, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, Mennonites have all the latest in technology, unless you're part of a very, very conservative group.
Okay.
Amish, I've heard, are finding ways to get around things like solar panels to charge their smartphones and things like that.
Wow.
They don't have electricity. They're not connected to the big world, but there are ways to do it.
I would imagine that as generations progress, there are going to be more ways to kind of circumnavigate that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, you make me want to watch Witness again.
Oh, yeah.
It was filmed actually very near where I grew up.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
Well, and I heard it was like I said, it's centered around the Amish, but none of the Amish people in the area would be in the movie. So they're all Mennonites, all the extras in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I also thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the basic faith is for both the Amish and the Mennonite? The faith that you were talking about, that's the commonality.
It's basic simplicity. Pacifism is very, very big for both of them.
Mm-hmm. No fighting.
The thing that
no war, no fighting,
no, they can't go to war. The sense of community is extremely strong, especially for Amish. Mennonites now are more involved in the bigger world, but for Amish, it would be unlikely that an Amish person would just suddenly move to New York and be Amish in the middle of a big city,
right?
Because they are not typically educated beyond 8th grade, which is a big difference between Mennonites and Amish.
Right.
The education.
Interesting. So,
but they're basically mainline. I mean, in some ways they're not considered Protestants, but they really are very similar to basic Protestant churches and their belief in Jesus and all the things in the Bible. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
the prologue in your book talks about you being in Charlottesville, where you are now, and being at a farmer's market, and you run into a young Mennonite woman who's selling. Right, she's a vendor there.
Right.
How do you know on sight that she's Mennonite?
Yeah, it's kind of odd because for her it was certainly because she was wearing a prayer covering and she had her hair long and pulled back into sort of long braids, wearing long dresses. It's kind of if you've been a Mennonite, I think it's like sort of a secret handshake. You can kind of spot
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
in airports or, wherever you may run into them.
Mm-hmm.
But increasingly, the dress is not any different. So she was part of some very more conservative group that made her
Viable.
identifiable.
What's a prayer covering?
Oh gosh, I wish I had one to show you, but it's what Mennonite women and young girls in my growing up needed to wear, based on some scripture that women should have their heads covered
Mm-hmm.
at all times because they might need to pray or do something. So it was just a little lace head covering.
Okay, like a scarf.
No, it was more like it was not like a long thing. It was just more like a
Like a
beanie
doily?
or a
Yeah.
bonnet.
A bonnet.
Well, yeah, some people tried to get away with a doily,
Right.
something that small. My mother said, "No, no, no, we're not going to do a doily."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the head must be covered.
Yes.
Yes. So
Which
in
is
your
very
memoir,
difficult.
which I loved your memoir, by the way.
Thank you.
It reminded me so much of and Scott knows this about me. The first book I fell in love with was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I read it over and over and over and over again. I have a larger print version of it now because the print was really small when I was a kid. It's like really teeny font. I can't believe I read it so many times with that. But there was scenes that really reminded me of Francie Nolan's journey in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And if you haven't read it, you must go read this book.
Oh,
Yeah.
such a long time ago, but I need to reread it, obviously.
Yeah. There's a few beats that are the same, but there's a scene in the very beginning. Your mother's making donuts for all of you, frying them in lard. I think that actually might be the name of the chapter. Yeah. What I remember is that this was like what you were thinking was these were a reward for being good, right? The donuts. And then you write that all you ever wanted to do was be a good girl. What did that look like for you growing up, being a good girl?
Well, it changed, obviously, because when I was at the donut frying stage, it meant if my mother said, stay over there with your younger siblings to keep them from getting near the hot lard, I took that responsibility very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And as seriously in that chapter, I took the responsibility of helping her cut out the donuts before the lard was hot.
Mm-hmm.
I think I took it seriously that I would model myself after her, in trying to make the vegetable soup in that chapter just right. But even then, I started trying to find ways to make the recipe my own by adding the little weeds.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it was partly to listen to what she said and also follow her example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which
was pretty intense with all she could do and be.
I mean, 12 children. My grandfather was, both my grandfathers were, one was one of 17, the other one was one of 11. And so
wow,
there are big families on each side. It's still unimaginable to me, though, to grow up like that.
Yeah.
So like I said, it reminded me of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And in a lot of ways, the beginning of your memoir could be almost any coming of age story. Because like you have this accident at school, which is mortifying, right? You're not allowed to go to the bathroom. There's a drip and then there's a river of pee that stretches to the desks, either, I guess, behind you or to the side of you. You as you mentioned, you like to watch your mother do housework. You're waiting for the day where you can really be of help to her, right? Like that's your goal, is to be like that right-hand person. You want to be liked by your teachers. That's also very common. I don't know anybody that doesn't want to be liked by their teachers, and then doesn't have some teacher that doesn't really like them too, like thrown in the mix like you did.
Yeah.
And you say that you wanted things that your friends had while you were in your teens, but I want to know, like, did you feel different then? And then what were your thoughts on people outside of your world? Or did you know about people outside your world while you were growing up?
Well, I actually had two worlds. I had the worlds of my friends at school
Right.
who were not Mennonites. And with them, I felt like, why can't I join Girl Scouts? Why can't I? I understood things like taking tap dancing lessons because dancing was against Mennonite rules, but there were, what's so bad about Girl Scouts?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I just wanted to fit in and be like other people, be able to go to the swimming pool in the summertime, um, not need to work all the time,
Mm-hmm.
which was, if you were on a family farm, at every age there was a task that was age appropriate.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if you're 4, you can drop seeds in the garden because you're right down there where you
Right.
need to drop the seeds.
Yeah.
So you're good, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to fit in, and equally, I felt a need to fit in with the people in the Mennonite community who, I needed to try to go through the whole getting born again
Mm-hmm.
thing, which I assume comes through in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Really wasn't feeling.
Yes. Yes.
and so it was like trying to bridge those two. I mean, the going to church was not a negotiable
Mm-hmm.
thing.
No.
You went to church if it was Sunday or Wednesday or whatever,
Yeah.
was going on. But it was always the tension between, and in my teens, being good. I mean, that was a problem because being good also included joining the church
Mm-hmm.
and wearing the dresses and the head covering and getting born again and all that. And I wasn't feeling like, I thought I was like good enough without.
Yeah.
I didn't sort of get that.
Well,
And everybody else seemed to get it.
yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean, I was the only one in the room who didn't seem to get it.
and I want to know, like, because you're talking about your teenage years, I mean, certainly at 12, I had ridiculous crushes on boys. Ridiculous. On boys that I saw only on television, on boys that I had never spoken a word to, boys that I saw at school. Were you having those feelings then? Were you getting crushes? Did you see others getting crushes around you?
Oh my gosh, I was everybody's go-to confidant about all their angsting over boys.
Yes.
And yeah, for sure. I thought the right one would come along, but I wasn't. I I never got really crushed out on anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't. I equally was not like crushed out on girls.
Right.
I just thought I I definitely could not imagine having a crush on a Mennonite boy or a date with a Mennonite boy. And additionally, Mennonite boys looked like everybody else. So they were dating cheerleaders and,
Mm.
uh, sort of the popular girls in school. They weren't limited to Mennonite girls
Right.
in many cases, but the reverse, a Mennonite girl dating someone who wasn't a Mennonite, was pretty unheard of in my experience.
So the Mennonite boys were going to school dressed like the other boys?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you were going to school in your long dress with your plain shoes and your 2 braids and your head covering?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Well, I had sort of my hair pulled back in this little faux bun thing
Yeah.
because Otherwise, it was out of control.
Sure, sure. And you had what were the ages of your siblings on either side of you? Like how
Well, I
far
was
apart are you?
numbered. Yeah, we're mostly 2 years apart. So I had
Okay.
two. Yeah,
So you didn't have any.
right.
No, you'll go ahead. Sorry.
No, right around me, the younger two were 2 years apart. The older ones were 2 years apart.
Okay. All right. Now I was
Yeah.
just wondering if you had siblings in your class.
Oh, no, no,
No,
no, no.
you didn't.
2 years ahead, 2 years behind. Yeah.
And then so you had mentioned Girl Scouts and like why can't you go to Girl Scouts? Which I still didn't really understand. Why couldn't you go to Girl Scouts?
Well, I think the uniforms were part of the problem.
Be-
Anything with a uniform was like almost faux military.
right, which
I,
was forbidden.
I, yeah,
Yeah.
I think the fact that it cost money
Mm-hmm.
was a problem
Yeah.
because there wasn't a lot of money. And it would have required transportation to Girl Scout events, and there wasn't the luxury of time,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of reasons not to do Girl
Sure.
Scouts.
Sure. So there was church camp though. And
Yeah, that was a huge, huge thing.
yes, and you saved money for that by trapping mice for like a penny a
Yeah,
mouse. Was that right?
yeah, yeah.
Which is like an increment that barely exists anymore.
Right. If people drop them, they just leave them on the
Yeah, there's
street.
not
Yeah.
much you can do with a penny nowadays. They don't even like
Yeah.
most places are cashless. But so a penny, you would get that. How much did you save in order to go to church camp?
Oh, I can't even imagine how much it was back then, but I'm sure it was $50 or $75. But
Wow.
that wasn't all mouse money.
Right.
I had
You-
allowance and other things,
Yeah.
and by then I was babysitting too.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
So when these crushes were happening all around you, you said that you weren't crushing on everybody, but you're the recipient. People come to you and tell you, "Oh, I'm in love with so and so or so and so and I."
Right.
Or were you feeling like I wish I was?
I think not at that stage. I just, I mean, I had so many, I was the editor of the newspaper and the editor of the yearbook, and I was getting straight A's. And I think I just focused on the things that at that point I thought I could focus on,
Right.
and didn't stress about the rest.
Sure. Sure. And
Yeah.
then there's this scene that I had to read a couple times because I didn't quite understand footwashing. But this is something that is particular to the Mennonites. Is that correct?
I suspect the Amish do that as well, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah. So can you just explain what it is and then talk about your encounter with Sarah?
Well, the biblical basis of it is Jesus washing the disciples' feet.
Mm-hmm.
I think the cultural basis of it was if people traveled a long distance, it was an act of kind of love and hospitality to wash their tired, dusty feet.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's where it came from. But it's supposed to sort of demonstrate humility and service, like I care enough that I will go on my knees to wash your feet.
Yeah.
And the church, I think, just based doing it on the very literal interpretation of, I think, what Jesus said after he washed his disciples' feet was, "This do in remembrance of me," or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they did it as part of the communion. My experience with Sarah, I mean, teenagers are very self-conscious, and to need to go back in the back room and wash the old woman's feet, who was already a little dirty and a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not really. She probably was not as frightening as I thought she was at that time, but to be paired with her was just really, oh my God, I can't believe I have to wash Sarah's feet.
Right.
So it was a thing.
So you literally had to wash her feet, though. There was like a basin
Literally.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
a basin of warm water and towels and the usual thing is that I would wash her feet and she would wash my feet, but given that she was both blind and a little crippled, she didn't have to wash my feet. It was a one-way thing,
Right.
but usually it went both ways.
But you were probably okay with that, huh?
Yeah, that worked
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I could see as a teenager. I was actually while you were describing the reason why, while you're giving the explanation, I was thinking when my mom and my sons and I took a trip to Senegal in 2019, and my mom has this thing with sand; she doesn't like it, and we had a guide with us, and we had taken this walk, and it had gotten her feet really dusty, and she was cringing from it, like it just freaks her out. And our guide knelt down and took a bottle of water and washed her feet. Very, very easily. It wasn't even a thought for him to do that.
Yeah,
And we were all staring at him like, what's happening? and,
yeah,
and she said
yeah.
it
I
felt great.
suspect. Yeah, I suspect that's the origin of it. I
Yeah,
don't know that to be true, but I imagine that is
right.
so.
Yeah, it totally makes sense now. When you said that, I was like, oh, that's what Ahmad did for my
Yeah,
mom. That's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
What about tourists in your town? Did you have encounters with them? Did did they want to take pictures with you like they did in the movie Witness, or were they around and you just didn't bother with them?
Well, they were around, and when I worked being a guide for the tourists, obviously it was a big part of my life.
Yes.
But I don't think we were as
Quaint.
we were. Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah, I was going to say sexy, but that takes it off in a whole new direction.
Right.
Yeah, I think they liked doing it with the Amish, and also it was forbidden to do it with the Amish, so that made it doubly enticing. Like the
Mhm.
Amish don't want you to take their pictures, so you'd hide behind trees and try to get them without their permission. Yeah, I don't remember a tourist ever asking to take a picture of me, even when I was doing the
The
guiding the
guiding.
tours
Hmm.
through the Amish farmhouse.
That's interesting. Um, you went to New York at some point to visit. Is it a cousin or an aunt? I forgot.
And my sister,
Sister.
my
Okay.
older
That's
sister,
right, because
yeah.
you have so many siblings. Certainly one would have gone away somewhere. Um, when you get there, she kind of tells you, like, abruptly or briskly to take off your covering, right?
Right.
So tell us about that.
Well, I think that's you know after she left home, although she was still a Mennonite, she was sort of a big city Mennonite, so she was no longer part of the community that expected you to go out into the world in some identifiable garb each day.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so she was a little self-conscious about it because in her mind she was getting over all that, and here I come being a pious-looking Mennonite girl. It's like, oh my God,
Right.
what?
Right.
What are
Get
you
out of that stuff.
doing?
Right. Take that off.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I felt kind of bad about it because I was just trying to be good
Yeah.
because, God is always watching. So I guess something terrible could happen.
Sure. Sure. You went off to college, which was not a given that you would do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, my older sisters and brothers by that time had gone, but they had all waited and saved up
Yes.
money.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
So
right.
that was the difference. I didn't want to wait because I thought I could get loans and scholarships, and so
Mm-hmm.
it just seemed a waste of time to hang around suffering.
Right. Were you suffering?
Well, suffering in that working some, you know, minimum wage kind of job when I really wanted to go to college. It's like everybody, all my friends were going, and I was as able a student as they were. So it's like, why shouldn't I go?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I got that in the book for sure,
Yeah.
but it was the idea I felt like was they thought they would have you for a few more years with them, and it kind of counted on that. And so,
Well, I think,
yeah.
yeah, no, I think what I've realized in retrospect is that part of it was they needed help on the farm.
Yeah.
I mean, when all the kids were gone, they were really struggling to try to do it on their own.
Mhm.
So each time somebody left,
Right.
the staff was depleted.
Yes. Yes. And then so you go to college. Where'd you go to college?
I went to a little liberal arts college called Lebanon Valley,
Mm,
which was just about an hour and a half from home.
right.
So
Right. Someone we just talked to somebody who talked about Lebanon Valley recently.
it's a fairly small school, but
Anyway,
that
I'll
would be
I'll
curious.
remember because
Okay.
I was like Lebanon, and then they said Valley, and I was like, oh, like where's that? um, so is it there that you realized you were attracted to women in college?
No, as a matter of fact, when I met some or I had friends who said that they were lesbian and I better not hang out with them because everybody would assume I was. It was like, what? What? That doesn't make any sense. What are you even talking about? So no, I was not at all in touch with it then.
Did you, when they identified as lesbian, what did you think of that?
I didn't, I didn't have much of a context for it, quite honestly, and either because I was so naive or I don't know. But yeah, it's like I knew what it was. I thought, oh yeah, I know about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas.
Right, right.
I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I really I didn't think there. I mean, in retrospect, I'm sure there were a lot of people in my world that I didn't know were gay or lesbian. But
Hmm.
at that point, it was just like, oh, well, that's interesting,
Right.
and
So you weren't
kind
you
of
weren't offended by it. You weren't intrigued by it.
no. And I stayed friends and traveled with those people, and
Hmm.
yeah, no, we definitely remained very good friends. So it was just an interesting. I just remember it's like, yeah, they warned me that I might, somebody might assume.
Right. I mean, being that you're one of 12 children, certainly your parents were intimate more than once. But did you
Yeah, that's amazing.
it really is. I mean, that's a lot of intimacy. But did you ever witness, was it ever modeled for you romantic affection growing up?
Oh my God, no. I never saw my parents touch or kiss or embrace. No, nothing like that.
And you didn't have it on television?
No,
No.
we didn't
You
have
didn't
television.
yeah.
Couldn't go to movies. So,
Wow. So
well, I went to that one movie, but
right, right. But so what were you expecting anything when you got to college? Like were you thinking, okay, now it's my time, like I'll probably fall in love with a man here?
no, as a matter of fact, I very much didn't want that to be what college was about because that was my father's fear that I I spend all that money going to college,
Right.
and all that happens when girls go to college is that they find a husband and then they're a housewife and they've wasted all that money,
Ah,
and you don't, who
yeah.
needs an education to be a housewife? So
Right, right.
so I was determined that that should not happen.
Mhm.
I mean, I dated a little bit, but mostly I thought I am just going to focus on doing well and getting to the next step, and then I'll worry about, you know,
Yeah.
finding a husband or dating or whatever.
So it was never a priority for you at that point.
No,
It had never been
no,
a priority, and you had never been kind of swept away by anything or anyone.
not then. No,
So
for sure.
when did it happen for you?
Yeah, not until I taught for 7 years and thought, okay, and I'd meet guys and try to date, and I was sort of the extra person to, you know, invite if you needed even numbers at your dinner party
And
or
how old were you
somebody
then around?
in my
In your
20s.
20s.
In my 20s,
So
yeah.
you were like mid
So,
20s, late 20s?
yeah.
Okay.
And then when I moved, it took a year's leave, which turned into 2 years leave, and moved to the wilderness, the small town in West Virginia. It was sometime there that I began to realize, oh, it wasn't about Mr. Right. It was about who I am. And that was a huge, huge revelation. And,
Wait, that what wasn't about Mr. Right?
I always thought I just hadn't found the right guy, that if
Mm-hmm.
I found the right guy, I was just sort of too selective, perhaps,
I see.
thinking, yeah, that there is the perfect guy out there and I just haven't found him. But I didn't want to settle. I mean, there were opportunities for settling. There are always opportunities for settling.
Sure.
And I didn't want to go there.
So your idea was that your fire hadn't been lit, as it were, because the right
Right.
guy hadn't come along with the matches.
Right.
And so now you're out in the wilderness in West Virginia and you're thinking,
Yeah.
huh, maybe there is no right guy for me.
Right.
So then what's
Yeah.
your next thought?
Well, I was open to, and I think I met someone who I was attracted to, who was a woman, and it was more like a, realization at the same time. Oh, well, no wonder, this is a possibility I hadn't even entertained. But I also thought, oh, I am not one of those. No, that can't be.
Mm-hmm.
This is just this sort of a little fluky thing, but it's not the thing. So it took me a while to get beyond that, just because of I knew by then that was a thing that could alienate you from mainstream society and from family. And no, that's not where I am. That's not who I am. So it took a while to get beyond that.
Yeah. I have a couple questions about that. Is there anybody else in your family that's gay?
Yeah, I have an older brother who's gay, and that was a very helpful role model. Even though we scarcely came out to each other, we were both so sort of hesitant, I think, to admit it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I was visiting him in California, and one of his friends at a dinner said, "So when did you guys come out to each other?" And we both sort of said, well, we never really did. We both knew, but we just didn't kind of make it official.
Yeah. Did he know about you when you were growing up? Did you know about him? Like, did you have an inkling or
Oh,
a sense?
not at all.
No.
No, I think he was I have 8 brothers, and I think he felt not bullied, well, maybe bullied, but certainly a bit teased for some of his interests and,
Mm-hmm.
just how he lived his life. I mean, he certainly had to do his share of farm work, just like everybody else, but um, they sometimes teased him for being a little gentler than some of them were.
Sure. And then, so going back to the woman that you discovered that you were attracted to, the first one, what did
Right.
that feel like for you?
Well, it felt sort of freeing, like, oh, I am lovable.
Mm.
And there are people in the world who I can love and be loved by. And so it sort of was very affirming. At the same time, it was a little frightening
Yeah.
because it's like, oh no, oh, oh, what would be the implications of that?
Right.
So
Right. So it was reciprocated. You were attracted to her, and
yes,
it was
yes,
mutual.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's good to know. That's that's nice.
Yeah, that would be a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me how that happened. The first time, like, did you guys, did, did she kiss you? Did you kiss her? Was it just hand holding? Did you go on a date? Like, what happened to go from
Oh,
someone who had really not been with anyone, right? Had you been with anyone at that point?
not seriously, no.
Yeah. Then to maybe going on a date or whatever you were doing with a woman. What did you guys do?
God, I'm not even sure I can sort of explain the trajectory of that because it was all so gradual. It's like,
Yeah.
when did the flower really open? What
Mm-hmm.
was the moment? And I'm not sure I can even pinpoint um, how it happened. I mean, I knew her as a friend for a
Right.
very long time,
Right.
so it was just an evolution of a very deep friendship in
Hmm.
some ways.
That's nice. That's really
Yeah,
nice.
no, it was very nice.
Um, so once you had acknowledged this feeling within yourself that there's this attraction, and you said you thought maybe it was a fluke, like maybe it was a one and done.
Yeah,
How did you know that this was who you are, that you were gay, that you were a lesbian?
I think when I started meeting other lesbians and realizing the spectrum of the experience and the spectrum of the people, it's like I think you maybe if you're trying to think it's a terrible thing, you choose the person most unlike you and
Mm,
say, "Oh, that that woman with a shaved head
right.
with the flannel shirt, I am so not her." And so then you kind of take that and run with it as if it's important information, but
Mm-hmm.
when you begin to realize, oh, that that therapist I work with in my professional life, I didn't know she was a lot, but she seems like a really nice,
Yeah.
just
So you're kind of
like I
eyes
think
open, this awareness.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like I think becoming part of a bigger community
Mm-hmm.
really went a very long way in opening my eyes to it and accepting myself within that community
Sure.
as much as anything.
Yeah. You came out to your family. I mean, did you come out to your family?
I did, yeah. I think that was sort of a variation on what I did with my brother who was gay. It was like they knew, I knew, they knew. We didn't talk about it. When my parents would visit, if I was with somebody, we'd pretend the guest bedroom was where one of us slept, and
Mm.
just all the games that you play to make people comfortable.
You were scared of their response.
Yeah, I was scared with their response. And then when I, I mean, most of my siblings certainly knew before my parents. And my mother, I never came out to, sadly, before she passed away, but I did come out to my father. And he was like, you know, there was, I mean, my brother did first, and then he was totally like, well, that's not anything that should tear families apart. What's the deal with that?
Mm.
And kind of set the tone. And
Wow.
when my wife and I got married, most of my siblings came to be part of it, which was lovely, um, and a lot of nieces and nephews. So it's it's been really a lovely part of the journey that the family has been to my knowledge, totally accepting. And if they haven't shared it or behaved any differently toward me. So that's good.
That's really amazing, especially because it's not just they're accepting you and who you are and how you love and who you love, but it's also a reflection on them, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
in their communities, to their families, or their, if they have families of their own, then they don't have to, but the idea would be to talk about you without any shame or hiding it, or, coming out.
Yeah.
It's another kind of
Yeah.
coming out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your dad, that's an amazing thing to say. I don't see why this should be anything that would tear a family apart.
Right. I think in his simple logic,
Yeah.
it was just, maybe if he were more educated, or his thinking was more complex on it, it would have he might have gotten involved with biblical passages. But it was a very simple, well, that's crazy. I hear some people think there's a problem with that, but why?
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. That really
Yeah.
is.
No, it was so affirming. It really was remarkable.
So you live with your wife in Charlottesville, Virginia. You have that community garden and you eat okra during Okra Week.
Absolutely.
You're an author. You're writing as well. Do you write articles or a blog or?
I don't do a blog or a newsletter. I'm working on a new novel,
Wonderful.
and I have finished a collection of short stories that are linked, sort of in the tradition of Olive Kittredge,
Mm-hmm.
where the short stories play with each other, which is a model I really like. And yeah, so I'd like to get that published. It's already finished, and I'm going to try to get it out into the world. So I do keep writing because I have a lot of writing still in me that I've needed to get out. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. Where can people find you?
I have a fairly limited social platform, but I am on Instagram, trying to do a little more on Instagram. I try to keep my website reasonably up to date with things that get published. And yeah, I'd say Instagram and my website are the best places.
That kind of stuff, keeping your website up and posting on Instagram, that's like farming a little bit, isn't it? Like
It is.
continually just like getting up and
Yeah.
like, what do I need to do
Pulling
today? Yeah.
pulling the weeds and
Yes.
pulling the weeds and planting and pulling. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it is. I hadn't thought about that, but it is a good metaphor, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Alice. We are so happy to have you. Thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. And again, her memoir is Plain, a memoir of a Mennonite childhood. So, and
Thank you.
it's
Thank you.
available. It's on your website, but it's also available where, like, just through regular booksellers like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very
It's
much.
everywhere. Thank you so much for the chance to talk to you. Hi, I'm Mary Alice Hostetter, and I am the only gay Mennonite woman in the room.